I'm gonna give you the secret to core strength, and we're gonna start right now. Okay, so when we're talking about core strength and core training, the first thing we have to do is identify what does that even mean. I like to think about using the term core interchangeably with trunk. And so if you think about core, it's basically, your whole gut and your whole back, right? So if you're thinking about the trunk, and I actually prefer using that term, is gonna be my spinal column, so using my erectors, my lower back, but using that in conjunction also with my abs. And so when we define that, we have to think about especially our abs. So our abs are this long, thin sheet of muscle on our gut, right? Covering our organs. It's a very uniquely structured muscular sheath, okay? So it's thinner, but it's very, very long. So it has interesting impacts on how we move.
Yeah, boy.
And when we're trying to think about core training or trunk training, that brings us to the term of dynamic trunk control. So when we're thinking about dynamic trunk control, we have to analyze, how does our trunk move? And from a very basic conceptual idea, our trunk is essentially responsible for side bending like this, okay? Flexing, extending, and rotating, okay? So that's where we've got to think about from the simplest terms. It's gonna be the side bends, flex, extension, and then rotation. So our trunk, our abs, our back, everything, our spinal column is going to be essentially responsible for that. And then the next step, now that we've defined what the trunk is and we understand, the trunk core, and then we also define those very basic movements. And the next step here in understanding the secret to core training is actually understanding, where is this applied to sports performance? Where does this go into the sport world or the athletic world, and how can we develop that long term? Okay, so now we're gonna go deeper into how this actually applies to the sports world, right? And this is stuff that we cover a lot more in depth in the Coach's Corner. So that's an email chain. If you click on the link down below, you can go to garagestrength.com. You can put your email and you'll just get weekly emails from me where we go a little bit more in depth with these conceptual ideas. But let's get into this right away. If we can think about, how does our trunk interact in regards to running, agility, throwing, batting, racket sports, and even swimming, okay? So first, we've got to think about if we're involved with running and agility. Essentially, the trunk is under a ton of pressure when we're sprinting at high speeds, okay? So if we come out, and if you've watched any of our speed videos, you know that you come out of the blocks, you're gonna have that steep shin angle, your trunk is gonna be leading forward, and you have a ton of energy that's transferring from the ground into our abs, and then that's going to lead to our sprint mechanics, right? So we're gonna go through those phases. So as you come out of the blocks, then you get into the drive phase, and then you get through the transition into that maximum mechanics. And when we're at max speed, we wanna have that really, really upright trunk position so that we have greater grounding forces underneath us so that we can continue to slow down the slowest down the track. So when we're thinking about dynamic trunk control, we have to be able to handle all of that energy and transition properly with good technique. If we come out of the blocks too early with our trunk too vertical, we're not gonna be able to accelerate as quickly as possible. If we're at top end speed and we can't hold our trunk upright because we lack dynamic trunk control, now we're gonna be leaning forward and we're gonna actually be slowing down because our mechanics and our stride length won't be as long. Okay, so now if we go into agility, when we're thinking about that dynamic trunk control, we've got to think about it from the mindset of, if I can control my spinal column and my abs when I'm running full speed, and now we can start to think about football players or soccer players. Okay, so if we're running full speed, and as we see, if I'm a linebacker and the linebacker reads that the running back is cutting back here, as I plant, I'm about to plant, okay, here, and before I'm planting, I'm co-contracting in my spinal column and in my abs, okay? And now, it's because I have this co-contraction, this is the dynamic trunk control, I'm not collapsing forward, I'm being rigid and I'm gonna be able to change. So my pelvis will then rotate and then my torso follows. If I didn't have that dynamic trunk control, I'd just collapse and I wouldn't be able to cut quick enough. And you can see that in younger kids in comparison to guys that play in the NFL. Younger athletes can't cut fast enough because they lack that coordination in their trunk. Okay, so now take up that concept, take that idea and use this with a racket sport. Now you can start to think about tennis, okay? If I'm Roger Federer back in his heyday and he was reading a shot, and we're gonna use the exact same example, he's reading a shot as he's planting here, but the tennis ball is coming across him. For him to be able to plant and cut and then make the proper hit, if he makes a poor decision or if he lacks that dynamic trunk control, now there's going to be an error in his trunk and he might lean forward and he actually can't make that shot because he's going to keep collapsing forward and the ball's over here. If he trains properly and if his strength coach has trained him to have advanced neurological adaptations in his trunk, now he can plant, he can see this and react quickly and come across and actually make that hit, okay? Make that play. It's the same thing as a quarterback. If a quarterback's about to get hit and they're falling backwards, but they can hold their trunk stable and still be rigid as they're releasing the football, they can now make a good pass. A quarterback that lacks dynamic trunk control, that isn't trained properly with these advanced concepts, they're gonna get hammered, they're gonna collapse, and they're gonna throw a pick six, something along these lines. And these things still happen to the best football players, but someone like Patrick Mahomes, who's on, about to collapse and he's throwing underhand, has tremendous dynamic trunk control, partially because he's just a genetic freak, but also because he's trained really well. Now, if we lead into somebody like a batsman in cricket or even a baseball player, okay, think about these types of athletes, right? If I'm a batsman in cricket, and if I'm trained properly, I can have both of my eyes on the bowler, okay? I can control my trunk. If I'm not trained as well and I'm a batsman in cricket, now I'm going to start to peek with my head. I'm going to lose that dynamic trunk control and I can't get into the defensive position as a batsman and make a solid hit. Same thing for baseball players. If a baseball player is reading the pitcher and knows that, let's just say that they see that there's a curveball coming, as they're leading with their pelvis, now their trunk control is going to help them adapt with their hands, okay? It's going to help them adapt with their hands to hit properly against a curveball in comparison to if they initially expected it being a fastball. So this also comes into play if we have a swimmer, okay? If we have a swimmer that can hold dynamic trunk control, which would be properly training their gut with their spinal column, now they can have a better posture in the pool, and when they have better posture in the pool, their stroke's gonna be a little bit longer. Their stroke's gonna be more effective. They can have greater power output. So we have to understand our trunk's responsibility with running, with agility, with racket-based sports, with throwing, with batting, and then even with sports like swimming, water polo. And now we can really get into, what are some examples of how we can properly train to get advanced neurological adaptations so we can improve our side bending, we can improve our flexion, our extension, and then ultimately our rotation, and then improve our overall sports performance. Okay, so now we're gonna go into our first round of movements, and this is gonna be based around flexion, okay? So we're in a dynamic flexion position or dynamic rotation. Okay, so this could be used for wrestling. There's a lot of sports, there's field hockey. Think about a running back, even when running backs are accelerating, they are in flexion here because they have a little bit of a forward lean and they're in that drive phase, and then they might have to throw a stiff arm, okay? Same with rugby. So we've got to think about it through where does this transfer, what sports? And so a very simple movement here would be if we would do a V-up throw, okay? So it might be a situation where we have a partner in front of us, or we're even doing a side rotation, but in this case, we're just gonna throw it for height. Now, I don't have a partner here, just my cameraman. I'm gonna be here, I'm gonna throw it, and I'm gonna absorb that, okay? Absorb, and when I throw and I absorb, if I didn't have a co-contraction, as I would throw, I would fall backwards, okay? Because my trunk, I would lose that in my abs. Same if my back was not co-contracting, my spinal column wasn't co-contracting with my abs together, then I would not be able to throw and absorb, okay? Throw and absorb, okay? Now, one thing I could do is go here for rotational absorption, okay? So that might be something that a baseball player or a batsman might use. And then we could even do something similar. And I'm thinking about with wrestlers have to, oftentimes they'll be in a collar tie here, right? And they're flexing, but they also need to be strong in their lower back, right? They have to have that dynamic trunk control. So this might be a movement. This is gonna be hard because it's a little heavier, but I'm here and I'm going, oh, and you can even see I lost that a little bit. So that is where we're talking about dynamic flexion in regard to dynamic trunk control. And these movements you could pair with a slow eccentric front squat or a power clean. I probably wouldn't do a superset with a power clean, but you can see how when you absorb a clean or when you're doing a front squat or a zombie squat, you have to train that skill, okay? So if we can utilize absolute strength movements with these advanced dynamic trunk control movements, it's gonna elicit this great response, and that's what's gonna lead to really big success for your specific athlete. Okay, so now we're going into an advanced movement in regards to that side bend, right? So this could be field hockey players. This is a movement that you can use if you are in a rotational sport because it does have some carryover. Now, I also believe that this is really, really, really important for agility, for cutting. So if you're in an open skilled sport, okay, an open skilled sport that has a lot of agility like soccer, or European or football, how all the Europeans, they hate when Americans do that, or American football, basketball. What we want to do is we can start off with, you know, what we call Chinese side bends, and we'll even use these with weightlifters, okay? So we might do, all right, I want you to focus on pushing your belly button out, squeezing in your lower back, and doing a little bit of just pre-fatigue, okay? So now you rest 30 to 60 seconds, and this is where you'll see how it impacts agility. And hopefully I can do a decent job demonstrating. I'm gonna stay on this turf or on the rubber right here. I'm gonna go, oh. And you can then see even there where that might even help something like speed skating, right? Short track or long track. But the whole point is we're doing a little bit of pre-fatigue, and then as we ground, we're gonna have a little bit of side bend, but if we co-contract properly, we can handle that isometric action. So utilize this if you're more in a sport that revolves around, you know, that side bend aspect, wrestling even to a point. And even if you have athletes that struggle to make cuts, you know, if you have wide receivers in football that are really, really slow out of a cut, this is a movement that they need to do to help them get out of that cut a little bit quicker. Okay, so the last thing that we're gonna share here in this long conceptual video is that we're gonna go over from that rotational movement, what we can do to improve dynamic trunk control rotationally. Okay, so we can think about when we're rotating, typically the pelvis will rotate first, and then the shoulders will follow, okay? If you're a pitcher, your pelvis will rotate and then the shoulders. If you're a shot putter, it's the same thing, discus thrower. Boxers, almost always, the pelvis rotates, then that has a trunk control that will elicit all that elastic energy that then transfers into the upper body, okay? That's a very basic way of understanding this, the dynamic trunk control rotationally. Okay, so what we like to do is when we have a pitcher or a thrower, like a shot putter or discus thrower, like all 5 of our athletes that went to the Olympics in Tokyo this past year, we might do advanced concepts like this to improve their trunk control to get bigger responses from their overall performance. Okay, so I'm gonna demonstrate a movement that you could use if you're a fighter, if you're in MMA, boxing, all of these sports, you can use this exercise. If you're a batter in baseball, same thing. And so we're gonna use this here. This is our Power Elastics band. This is our strength band. And this is not a shameless plug because we try to make money so we can pay our athletes so we can get better at our jobs and just continue to give you guys a lot of free content. So pick this up today at powerelastics.com. Now, what I'm gonna do is I wanna get into like a half turn position if you were a shot putter. And I believe that pitchers and fighters could benefit from this because it increases their coordination. Okay, so the whole point here is we're gonna hold in the handles, and if I'm a right-handed, you know, and we wanna do both sides, if I'm right-handed, I'm gonna lead with my left here, and then as I lead with my left, I'm gonna punch forward, okay? So that's a little hard there. I'm gonna back up just a hair. I'm gonna be here, I'm gonna come here, punch forward. Now you can just see, I sort of got thrown off because I wasn't exercising the muscular action as well as I probably could have. So we're gonna do that again. Here, I'll step, come forward, boom. And I wanna really think about holding and then coming back from a slow eccentric, because now that's also gonna help me train that coordination. Here, boom. And now I'm holding, okay? So I wanna hold, come back nice and slow. So you can start to see and you'll start to feel all throughout your trunk and even in your lower back how you can exercise and stimulate that dynamic trunk control. And all of that goes into sports performance. So this is something that an offensive lineman could even do if they see a stunt and they have to rotate to pick somebody up. They can use that exercise to hit, you know, and same with a running back if they're throwing a stiff arm rotationally. So all of these are advanced movements that you can utilize to improve your dynamic trunk control. And if you need help with this, you can pick up our SLAUGHTERFEST program. Click on the link down below, go to garagestrength.com. We include a lot of these different concepts. Or if you're a coach and you want more conceptual ideas, you can head over to garagestrength.com and put in your email into our Coach's Corner, where you'll get a weekly email from us discussing all these advanced concepts that we use with our champions here at Garage Strength. Until next time, guys, peace.